Hi, here's a tips and advice video for standards-based grammar grade 6. I'm going to give you several examples showing you how I teach different grammar skills from this book. However, the real power of this video will be showing you how I structure my grammar and writing programs so you get the absolute most out of your writing and grammar instruction time. You'll find that if you use the system I'm about to show you, your writing and grammar instruction time will be incredibly efficient, and there will be very little wasted time. Considering how much there is to teach and review with writing, this is an incredible way to teach and reinforce hundreds of writing skills, making your students the best writers they can possibly be. So I'll begin with how I teach several grammar skills using several worksheets from standards-based grammar, and I'll show you how to use a grammar journal in order to get the most out of every worksheet. You'll see how I use the worksheets with the grammar journal on these few worksheets, and you can use the same procedure for all the worksheets throughout the book. And you'll even get some excellent tips for teaching several specific skills. Next, I'll show you how I use that grammar journal as a writing journal to help the students keep templates for writing paragraphs, essays, and research reports. If you use the grammar journal as a writing journal, every major writing assignment you give, they will have an easy to follow resource to use if they ever get stuck on a writing assignment. Finally, this video will show you how to structure your entire writing and grammar program using a daily routine. This routine will do several powerful things. First, it will help your students get the absolute most out of your writing instruction time. Even better, it'll help your students practice every writing and grammar skill they've ever learned, all in the context of actual writing situations. The key is to create a systematic routine that causes the students to practice each lesson you do, even these grammar lessons from standards-based grammar, and practice them on a regular basis. The great thing about this routine that you're going to see is that it puts review and mastery on autopilot. Once you've established this routine, it makes your life so much easier because the students don't have to think about the procedure. The students already know what to do, so you're not wasting mental energy getting started. They just go from task to task to task, and it's a very efficient use of your time. So the first thing I'm going to show you in this tips and advice video is how I teach the worksheets and extensions using a combination of a writing journal and a grammar journal. If this sounds like something you can use, this video is definitely for you. Okay, let's get into some ways you can teach the worksheets from standards-based grammar along with a grammar journal. So here's a typical worksheet in standards-based grammar from the grade 6 edition. You can see the lesson is right here for you. And it really just takes a few seconds, maybe a minute or two, to review the lesson. You could actually do it while the students are passing out the worksheets, getting everything out and settled. I actually have the worksheet under document camera before I go home for the next day. And it literally takes me seconds to review the lesson at the top of the page, and boom, I'm ready to teach it. That's a real benefit of these worksheets because really it's one less lesson plan you have to do. It's printed, it's ready to go, it takes seconds, you know what you're going to do, you can see the next day's worksheet, you can see the next day's worksheet, you can see your plan for the year. So just having one less lesson plan in a high quality program there ready to go, super beneficial. I teach the lesson using the worksheet under document camera, and I have a spiral notebook we call a grammar journal that I'll use to teach the lessons, and the students will actually have a spiral notebook as well. And we start by they know the grammar lesson's coming up. They have the worksheet. They know to take out their grammar journal. They're ready to take notes. They put the date. They put the title of the worksheet at the top, or they skip a couple lines and they could just keep the next day's lesson will be below the previous day's lesson. So they know to set up their paper and they're ready to go. When I'm ready to go, they're ready to go, and we get started with the worksheet. So I'll review the worksheet, and sometimes there might be a trick or some notes that they need to take. So we use our grammar journals for that. And the added benefit of doing this program year after year is I save my grammar journals from the previous year. And when I do a lesson from the standards-based grammar book, I have last year's journal right there, and I do a quick look at how I taught it. Sometimes if I don't like how I taught it, I might make a note for next year. Literally, it takes a minute to review the worksheet. I see how I taught it last year. And the sixth grade, I've taught so many times that it's just burned into my brain. I don't even have to think about it. Here's a worksheet called Subordinate Conjunctions. And you can see that the main lesson is right there in the box. I'll go over the key terms in the box. We'll highlight keywords. Students have highlighters. They have pens because we really annotate this page like crazy just to make sure that they're all engaged and focused. You can see there's conjunctions. We'll highlight that. There's subordinate conjunctions. We'll highlight that. We'll talk about it. We'll go over the definition. Subordinate conjunctions connect independent clauses with dependent clauses. Then you can see there's a word bank. We'll go over the subordinate conjunctions. And obviously this is a really complex term, so they're going to need some time to really get comfortable with the term subordinate conjunction. And that will bring us to our grammar journal. So I'll direct them to the grammar journal. You can see in the grammar journal, they labeled the date up at the top, titled the grammar journal, the name of the worksheet that we're doing, and they put the page number. Now, to explain what a subordinate conjunction is and to get that firmly locked into their brain, you could see I wrote subordinate, but I highlighted sub, and then we put sub means below. And I put some words that have that idea in them so they could start connecting subordinate with, in the real world, a subordinate is below a boss. They are subordinate to a boss. Now, a substitute teacher is below the teacher. They are temporary. They're not the main teacher. And then a subcontractor is below the main contractor. So a main contractor may get a subcontractor to help, but the main contractor's the boss. So it works the same way in a sentence. A subordinate conjunction creates a dependent clause that is subordinate to the independent clause because the dependent clause can't complete a thought. It needs the independent clause to complete its thought. So that's how we use the grammar journal to reinforce the lessons. You can see here on the grammar journal, we start this day by going over what is a subordinate conjunction, what does it do, and how is it important in a sentence. You can see we put subordinate conjunctions, highlighted it in yellow. They begin a dependent clause. So subordinate conjunctions lead to dependent clauses. Now, dependent clauses are incomplete sentences. They'll have a subject and a verb, but no complete thought. So therefore, the dependent clauses are subordinate to the dependent clauses. Then we write an example on there so they can see, if I get an A, I will be happy. They can see the subordinate conjunction if, and then we label it's an incomplete sentence, and it's a dependent clause. You can see the comma, then the independent clause, I will be happy, so we label it. That makes this a complex sentence, and the independent clause provides the complete thought. Okay, so I just showed you a great way to introduce subordinate conjunctions. However, this will be a very new concept to most of the students. And since our goal is to get the students to write complex sentences, One overview lesson probably won't be enough. So, on the first worksheet of any standard, I might do as many lessons as it takes until I feel that they're ready to launch into the next few worksheets. And that's very true for subordinate conjunctions. So first, we need to make sure they are very comfortable with subordinate conjunctions. So after they put the title Subordinate Conjunctions at the top, I did a little activity. We opened up a literature book. I looked ahead of time to see a page that had a lot of dependent clauses in it. And I asked them to look at their worksheet, look at the word bank, and find as many subordinate conjunctions as they could. And they started making a list of the subordinate conjunctions in the book. You can see they found as, since, so, because, after, when, and some of them you can see the check marks. When we saw it again, we added a check mark. So they saw 3 as, 2 since, 3 so's, 3 althoughs. You could see they found lots and lots of subordinate conjunctions. So they're already getting comfortable. They've been looking at the box. I might point out, oh, look at the third sentence. What do you see there? Oh, I see it. And they'll call it out. Once you've done this a couple times, you can get it moving pretty quickly. So now they're comfortable with it. And that just might be day one. There's the lesson. We spent 10 minutes on it. We might move on to something else. Or if time allows, we might move on and we'll go to the next part of the worksheet. Again, you can see the activity. They have to unscramble the words, the subordinate conjunctions. Again, they're getting comfortable with the subordinate conjunctions. And I may not give them time to finish it. I just have them finish it for homework because we've been practicing it. But you can move pretty quickly if your class is well organized. So we might come back on day 2 and review that. And the activity there has them unscrambling the subordinate conjunctions. So again, it gets them back into reviewing and getting comfortable with the subordinate conjunctions. Then we'll talk about dependent clauses, and they'll learn that dependent clauses are called dependent clauses because they depend on something else for their complete thought. And that something else is an independent clause. So there'll be a dependent clause attached to an independent clause because it's the independent clause that completes the thought for the dependent clause. We talk about that, and then we go back to the literature book, and they've already found a bunch of subordinate conjunctions. So really, they found a whole bunch of dependent clauses because the subordinate conjunctions begin a dependent clause. What I want them to start seeing now, you can see on the notes, is they look at their notes and they count how many times did they see the dependent clause at the beginning of a sentence. You can see we highlight dependent clause, independent clause in yellow, and they know to look for the subordinate conjunction. So we highlighted that in pink. And below it, they'll put independent clause and dependent clause. Now, this is where the dependent clause is in the back of the sentence. So we went back to the book. You can see that there are far more sentences that started with dependent clauses than ended with dependent clauses. And there's 2 reasons why this is a big deal. First, if a sentence begins with the dependent clause, they're going to put a comma after the dependent clause. If the dependent clause is in the back, there's no comma. The second reason why this is important is because a sentence will have a certain flow. There's a rhythm that sentences have. When a writer is writing, they get into a rhythm. Putting the dependent clause at the beginning of a sentence versus the back really changes the rhythm of the sentence. Sometimes a writer wants to emphasize something in the sentence, and the thing that's being emphasized is really the dependent clause. So you want to hit that first. Or the dependent clause being first might build suspense as the reader has to wait for the main idea of what the sentence is really trying to say. And those happen very quickly as a reader is reading, but the writer can really manipulate how the reader experiences a story by how they arrange the sentences. So we'll just talk about what sounds better. And we might even read a couple of the sentences and ask, would it sound different if we flip-flop the independent clause and the dependent clause? So there's so many writing skills that are being taught here just within the context of the grammar lesson that sometimes I might actually spend 25, 30 minutes on the lesson where I really didn't mean to, because we're getting so much good writing instruction out of it. Let's go over a few more worksheets from Standards-Based Grammar Grade 6. Here's a worksheet from later in the unit on complex sentences. Here you can see the students are going to begin by starting the sentences with a dependent clause. Then they're going to put a comma. Then they're going to write the independent clause, the complete sentence. So they're getting practice using the subordinate conjunctions in real writing situations. For example, the first one, they may put, as we were waiting for the bus. Okay, then what? Oh, it's not a complete sentence. Comma, it started to rain. So they'll do that for the first 6 sentences. Then you'll see the directions say at sentence 7, flip-flop it. Instead of starting with the dependent clause, end with the dependent clause. And it really helps for the students to come up with the dependent clause first and then think of a sentence and then write that sentence first, then add the dependent clause. So they might think in their head for number 7, okay, I need so I don't get wet. Okay, what could I put in front of it? Oh, I went inside the house so I wouldn't get wet. There's your sentence. So they'll do that for number 7 through 13. And there's so much you can do with the worksheet besides just the worksheet. You can add to it. So as a follow-up assignment for a homework assignment, you could have the students put an S above the subjects, a V above the verbs. Both the dependent and independent clauses will have subjects and verbs, and then put a CT above the complete thought, which will only be on the independent clause. So you could follow it up by having them write independent clause below the independent clause and dependent clause below the dependent clauses. And you take one worksheet and you might get 3 or 4 lessons out of it. And you really only have to go over a couple of items and they'll let the students work independently. So for the cost of just a few minutes of explanation for each of these things I just talked about, you're getting over an hour of work either in the classroom or for homework. So while we're talking about sentence writing, the dependent clause and the independent clause creates a complex sentence. Let's take a look at another worksheet along those same lines. This is called the Compound Complex Sentences worksheet. And this is really an exciting worksheet because this is the most difficult type of sentence to write. When you see elementary school students writing sentences of this quality and you start seeing them put these types of sentences in their writing, it just gives you a good feeling like you're really making a difference in the students' writing. So what this worksheet does, again, there's the box and you go over and highlight the main terms. And it even says here at the top, it's a review. The students should already know simple sentences, compound sentences, complex sentences. And then from there in the middle of the box, there's the compound complex sentence. We'll highlight that in yellow. And they'll see just how easy it is to write this really complicated sentence. They already know how to write compound sentences. They already know how to write complex sentences. So they could either write a compound sentence and add a dependent clause, or they could write a complex sentence and add a coordinate conjunction and another independent clause. You can see the sample there. It's real easy to do. So start with the dog barked and the cat ran away. There's your compound sentence. Okay, what happened to make the dog bark? When he saw the cat. So you can put in, when he saw the cat, comma, the dog barked and the cat ran away. Boom. There's your compound complex sentence. So again, there's so much more you can do with this once you've taught it for a while. You can see they have practice there. They'll practice it for a couple more worksheets. And you've got a really powerful skill taught that the students can put into their writing. If you want more information on how exactly they could take a skill like this and incorporate it into their writing on a regular basis, you could check out the Complete Writing Program or Writing Tricks Plus. They both go into a program where the students are systematically practicing these grammar skills on a regular basis. And it just shows you how to set up a routine. It gives you the worksheets. It gives you the journal activities. And again, it's one less lesson plan you have to worry about. Another grade 6 worksheet. This time it's on the capitalization rules. It gives you 9 capitalization rules that students need to know. And even by 6th grade, there are some real tricky rules that it gets really confusing. In their grammar journals, I have a picture that we draw that has all the grammar rules in it. So as they're doing the worksheets, the students can think of the pictures and that'll help them. Oh yeah, that's on the picture that we drew. It's a picture of a baseball field, and each part of the baseball field has some of the capitalization rules on them. It's got a clock on the scoreboard for the days of the week. The pitcher's name is Cappy Tall Eyes. He's got a cap with tall eyes on it. That makes them remember capitalize, Cappy Tall Eyes. And like he'll look at the camera and says, "Hi, Mom. Hi, Dad." That reminds the students to capitalize Mom and Dad if that's their name. Then he says it in Spanish, "Hola, Mama. Hola, Papa." And that reminds them to capitalize languages because he's bilingual. He's saying it in Spanish too. You can see rules 4 and 5 are covered just in that one little picture. So we come up with the trick. We spend a day or two just drawing a little study picture. They have this worksheet in their writing folders to use as a reference. They have the picture to use as a reference. And then they do the worksheets. And there's really no confusion on should I capitalize this word or not. There also is a second picture that helps them remember the tricky words. There is a list of those in the book. It explains words that you shouldn't capitalize that people often do capitalize. It's a picture of a schoolyard, and there's a tree with a leaf falling. Fall helps them remember not to capitalize the seasons. Subjects in school, you wouldn't capitalize unless they're the name of the class or it's a subject. So you might capitalize English because it's a language, but you wouldn't capitalize social studies unless it's the title of the class. This worksheet can be really helpful. And there's worksheets in here that do go over concepts like this. This next worksheet from the grade 6 edition is about objects of verbs and prepositions. So it gives an overview of what objects are. And the students learn that objects receive action from the verbs. For prepositions, they're not receiving action. They're actually, prepositions will connect its object to another word in the sentence. So they're learning how objects work. Either they're receiving action or they're being connected to another word in a sentence. The students in their journal will practice that. Then the worksheet at the bottom, you can see them practicing verbs. So if we wash the car would be the object of the verb. Clean the room is the object of the verb clean. And then at the bottom, they'll work on prepositions. They'll use the prepositions in a phrase. So they're also learning that prepositions are always, always, always used in a phrase. And this is why you don't end a sentence in a preposition, because then you're not using it in a phrase and it's not a preposition. So you might say, over the rainbow. So rainbow is the object of the preposition. Above me. Me is the object of the preposition. This will come in handy when you try to explain the difference. When do you use I and when do you use me? When do you use they? When do you use them? They'll learn, oh, if it's an object, I use me, I use them, I use us. And if it's a subject, then I'll use I, they, or we. So just knowing the vocabulary here will make it easier to explain other concepts. Here's a worksheet on verb tenses where the students learn about perfect tenses. I like this worksheet because it reminds me of when I was in school. I always wondered why we had words like swam versus swum. Like, what's up with swum? Or rang or rung. Why would we use one versus another? And things like we say went, but we wouldn't say he has went. We'd say he has gone. So I always thought that was really weird. Then when I took Spanish, I learned about perfect tenses and it made a lot more sense. So here on this perfect tenses worksheet, all the students really need to know is right here in the middle of the lesson. The past perfect tense is made by using had. She had finished her shopping. The present perfect tense is made by using has or have. She has finished her shopping, or the plural, they have finished shopping. The future perfect tense is made by using will have. She will have finished her shopping. And you can see the review right below where the students can annotate it and use it more easily on the worksheets. It just says had is used with the verb to make it a past perfect tense. Has or have is used with the verb to make it a present perfect tense. And using will have with a verb will turn it into a future perfect tense. And that's followed up with the activity that starts getting them comfortable with that idea of using had, has or have, or will have with verbs. And it starts getting them comfortable identifying perfect tenses and using perfect tenses. However, they might be able to identify and use perfect tenses, but it's still a very abstract concept. And if they're not understanding what's really happening with that, it's, in a sense, it's kind of a waste of time, other than it can help them decide whether to use swim or swum. But to really supercharge this concept and get the most out of it, they really need to understand why the perfect tense is happening in the first place. And I found that the best way to do that is doing an activity, which is actually very similar to an activity they're going to do later in an extension. And I've discovered they learn so much more if I do this activity right at the beginning. What we'll do is we'll select an event. In this case, it's Mom's birthday. And we'll write a sentence together in the past perfect tense. Then we'll write a sentence together in the present perfect tense. And then write a sentence together in the future perfect tense. And I'll show them how perfect tenses can explain exactly when something is happening. And this will not only help them understand what's happening when a perfect tense occurs, you'll see that there's a major benefit if you do this when you read difficult text, such as history text, science text, and even literature. When you point out perfect tenses and ask the students, what hint is the reader giving us about what's going on in this text, because the writer chose to use a perfect tense? It's not an accident that they used it. So in this activity, with each sentence we write, we'll draw a timeline showing how the perfect tenses tell exactly when something is happening. And that timeline will provide a big clue as to other things that are happening in the text. And you'll be able to point those things out when you read other texts. What is that other thing that's happening when a perfect tense is used? We'll go over that in a second, but on day 2 and 3 of doing this journal activity, I'll actually have the students make a timeline in groups so they could really get an idea of what's going on. And I'll have them discuss what's going on. They'll discuss the perfect tense, how it was made a perfect tense. They'll practice using the vocabulary. You can give them sentence frames and ask them leading questions. And by the time you finish, they'll know it and be able to explain it about as well as you can. So here's how we'll start this activity, and I'll explain to you the ideas I'm trying to get through to them. So in this sample, they might say, Rosalie had written a poem for Mom's birthday. So you can see that's the past perfect tense. And on this particular one, to see why perfect tenses are so important, you get the students in the habit of explaining exactly when something's happening, because perfect tenses are perfect because they're very specific on when an event is happening. So you can see now Rosalie had written a poem for her mom's birthday. Well, what does that mean? What is the writer putting in your head? She had written a poem. Well, that means something. It didn't say has written. It said had written. So that means, so you can see, well, here's now. You can see where the poem was written, and you can see that perfect tenses are very specific because we know that the poem was written before Mom's birthday. Mom's birthday was before now in the past, and the poem was written even further in the past. So that's making a point. So usually this would be followed up. Rosalie had written a poem for Mom's birthday. So something happened, and we need to know what happened and when for the next thing to make sense. So you might say, Rosalie had written a poem for her mom's birthday, but she lost it. Oh, okay, now it's important to know when the poem was written and when Mom's birthday was, because somewhere in that timeline, the poem was lost. So the same idea applies to present perfect tenses. Rosalie has written a poem for Mom's birthday. That's present tense. It's happening now. The poem is written. Mom's birthday is happening in the present. Okay, so what are we going to do with that? Rosalie has written a poem for Mom's birthday. She will read it after we cut the cake. Oh, okay. It's perfect. It explains exactly when something's happening. And then a future perfect tense, Rosalie will have written a poem for Mom's birthday. Now this is happening in the future. She hasn't written the poem yet. So here's now, poem's not written. She will have written the poem for Mom's birthday. So no, Mom's birthday is way in the future. The poem will be written in the future, but it will be written before Mom's birthday. So on this future perfect tense, we may have already written, she's been very busy. So if we've written, she's been very busy, obviously, this explains why the poem hasn't been written. In our sentence, Rosalie will have written the poem by Mom's birthday, reassures the reader that the poem will indeed be written. You know, she's been very busy. So that's the added detail for future perfect tenses. It's already been added at the beginning. So this activity right here might be day 1. On day 2 and 3, you can write more of these kinds of sentences and have the students make timelines in groups. Have them discuss what the follow-up details might be for the past and present perfect tenses, or what the current detail is on future tenses that creates the need for a future perfect tense. Final note about perfect tenses, you can follow up this lesson by looking for perfect tenses once in a while in the content that you're reading in your other subjects. This can apply to any complex text your class is reading in science, history, and especially your literature texts. Each time you stop and point out perfect tenses when you see them in difficult texts, you can pause, ask the class, 1, what perfect tense is this? Is it a past perfect, present perfect, or future perfect? 2, what is the connected detail that required the perfect tense in the first place? And 3, make the timeline together and ask, how does this help us understand what's going on in the text? Our 6th grade literature series has a unit where we're required to train the students to visualize what they're reading. I challenge you to do this activity and not visualize what's happening in the text. Finding perfect tenses in difficult text is a great way to help students visualize what they're reading. Do this activity enough times and seeing text come to life starts becoming a habit. And the last worksheet that I'd like to show you is the grade 6 has a short chapter on sentence diagramming. It just covers the very basic of sentence diagramming. You can see this worksheet as we go through the unit. We start adding vocabulary. They'll write down the definitions. They'll see an example of how to diagram. By the time we finish this unit, the students can diagram sentences in kind of a basic way. It really comes in handy because when we're reading something in science or social studies and we come across something really difficult, it can be really helpful to unpack the sentences by diagramming. And you can see just how sentences are put together, especially in academic situations. There's vocabulary that's very sophisticated, and the meaning of the sentence gets lost because they're often long and have complicated issues. They're on topics that the students aren't familiar with. So we might stop and diagram a sentence and break it down. It has key vocabulary. We can see how the phrases are put together to create really deep meaning. And I've discovered over the years that if you do this once in a while, you could do it once in class and then give a homework assignment to have them just try one sentence on their own. The students start getting in the habit of unpacking the sentences that are difficult automatically. And I might actually catch the students doing it as they're reading, especially when we do research reports, because they're reading complicated information on topics they don't know. And if they see something really important and they want to understand it, eventually I just catch myself diagramming the sentences in my head if I come across something kind of complicated. It really takes your reading to a whole new level once you start seeing sentences in your mind diagrammed. It's really helpful. Okay, moving on to the next section, I'm really excited to show you not only how the journal extensions help reinforce the grammar skills in standards-based grammar, but also how you can use the grammar journal you're already using with standards-based grammar to help solidify all your major writing skills. By using your grammar journal as a writing journal, you can teach all the major skills such as paragraph writing, essay and research report writing in a very simple, specific way that will give the students a template for those skills that they can refer to for every writing assignment you give throughout the year. And for homeschool teachers, they'll have these templates for paragraph writing, essays, and research report writing. They'll have these templates for their entire academic lives all in one place. If you want more information about how to specifically teach the paragraph, essay, or research report, you can check out those books later on the website. But here in this section, you'll see how you can use your grammar journal as a writing journal and have everything your students need to be successful writers all in one place. Here's a worksheet with a journal extension. However, before I get into the extensions, here's how to turn your grammar journal into a writing journal so the students have a reference for all your major writing assignments. Now, obviously, you can teach it any way you want, but this might help give you ideas on how you can structure your program. This is a system that really has worked well for me. So you can see right here, this says writing journal. This is not the grammar part of the Spiral Notebook. The front part of our Spiral Notebook is the writing journal, and we'll use it when I teach the paragraph. I have a book called How to Teach the Paragraph, and I'll do the lessons from that in here. And then from there, if they've learned to write a solid paragraph using my simple tricks for the paragraph, it literally takes minutes to teach them how to write essays, and we'll do the practice for the essays, mainly the pre-write parts of the essays. We'll practice that in here. Then once they've mastered essays, it takes a day or two to teach research reports because they'll follow the same pattern, the same trick. And this front part will serve as a review when we're writing paragraphs, essays, or research reports. They will have this as a reference if they get stuck, but most students will have it burned into their head so well, they won't need it as a reference, but we'll do the lessons right here and they'll have them forever as a reference. Some of the students take these with them into 7th, 8th, 9th grade to future grades because it's such an easy way to write. So that's the front of the Spiral Notebook. Then what I have them do at the beginning of the year, we set up the front and we call it our writing journal. Then I tell them, okay, flip the journal over, just flip it over. Now you can see at the bottom, what is normally the heading of the page is now at the bottom, but the 3 holes are still on the left. It's okay, they get used to it. We flip it over and this will put grammar journal. So they'll write grammar journal up at the top. What this is for is this is a resource. This is where they do their journal extensions. This is where they do their grammar practice. If I have a trick to show them, if they need to take notes, they'll do that on this side. As we go through this, you'll see how we keep it organized. A lot of stores at the beginning of the school year will sell Spiral notebooks real cheap. So I'll buy a class set. The students know on the first day of school, they get a letter on supplies to bring. They have a couple that they bring already. Students who don't have it or come in the middle of the school year, I've got a supply of Spiral notebooks I can give them. It really keeps everything organized and saves so much time just digging out for pieces of paper, losing things. This really helps a lot. Okay, so back to the extension. Think of a task that can be explained easily. For example, you can explain how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Write a 1-paragraph explanation of how to do that task. Use at least 3 complex sentences. Use subordinate conjunctions below for ideas. So it gives you a word bank. Those are all the subordinate conjunctions, which they'll need to write their dependent clauses. And they need a dependent clause to write a complex sentence. So they go to their journal, and you can see they set it up. They put the date, they put the name of the worksheet, and sometimes we'll put the page number as well. The first sentence I'll usually write with them. It kind of shows them how to get started, gives them a little bit of confidence. After modeling how to do the first sentence, I'll encourage the students to finish it on their own. Now, at this point, you can decide, do you want to keep working with them? You may have other things in the class you may need to do, so it gives you a little breathing room. If an emergency happens, you got some time to take care of it, or you could turn this into a full-blown lesson where the advanced students continue with the journal, but you continue to work with the emerging writers or the mid-level writers, and you can actually write with them. And that's what I do. I write with them so they can see what I'm doing. They pick up all kinds of vocabulary from me. They see my style. They get ideas for their writing. And it makes their job a lot easier when you're writing with them. So you can see I put, whenever you want a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, begin by taking out everything you need. So there's my dependent clause. There's my subordinate conjunction. There's my dependent clause. There's my comma. And there's my first sentence. So I'll point all those out to the students, then encourage the high-level students to continue. Now I'm going to keep writing, and the lower-level students can kind of follow me. So apply a healthy amount of peanut butter to one of the slices of bread. Do you see any subordinate conjunctions? Nope. I only have to use 3, so I didn't use one on this. Next, put the jelly on the other slice of bread, because if you put it on the peanut butter side, you are likely to have jelly squirt out. Do you see a subordinate conjunction? Oh, look, there's the word because. Oh, so the dependent clause is in the back. Did I use a comma? Nope, no comma, because the dependent clause is in the back. Then after you put the two halves together, you'll need to decide whether or not you want to cut the crust on or off. Okay, you can see there's my third complex sentence. And then I end the paragraph with, personally, I like the crust on. Something like this, the students will just want to write forever to explain, and then they could see, oh, he's not asking for a novel here. He just wants one paragraph. So there you go. You'll have students in your class who are really low, and at the very least, they can just copy you. And there's value in that. So if you're writing with them, they could just copy you, and that's good practice for emerging writers, just to copy somebody who knows what they're doing. Then for the mid-level writers, they might just watch you for 2 sentences or 3 sentences and then feel confident, okay, I get it, and then finish it on their own. But it also gives you a chance to stop and point out things like commas. Maybe you used a vocabulary word. Maybe you used a trick that you taught earlier in the school year, and hey, does anybody see the trick I just used? There's so much you can do when you're writing with the students. All right, in this tips and advice video, I've shown you ways I teach certain grammar skills and how to extend the worksheets and standards-based grammar into longer, more productive lessons. I've also shown you how I use a grammar journal to streamline the teaching of the worksheets and extensions. On top of that, I've shown you how to use that grammar journal as a writing notebook, which further streamlines your writing lessons along with your grammar lessons. Now, I'm going to show you one more excellent trick that will help your students review the dozens and dozens of writing lessons they've learned in your class and in other classes. And this review will happen in a daily systematic routine. So this journal routine, I call it the Smart Start. It's just a routine. They know how to get started. They come in, they get set up. They work for 30 to 40 minutes on really targeted skills. Because it's a routine, you can work in small groups while the students are working independently. You can handle emergencies. You can just get a breather. I usually use this for small group time where I'm pulling students out and working on, I might be working on this, or I might be working on another project while the students are doing this. It's a way to build in some time into your classroom to do other things that are really important. So here's how it works. I keep a daily agenda on the board in the front of the room, and the students just know to look up at the agenda. What they're looking for is Smart Start. And under Smart Start, they'll see the activities that we do. Under it, I'll have a heading. It says journal, and then it says grammar, and then it says language skills. And there's room below each heading, and each day what I do is I erase the old one, and before I go home, I'll write the new activity. And so the students come in, They see, oh, first step is journal. They get out their spiral notebooks, and once the bell rings or class time starts, I'll just point to each, give a quick explanation. Okay, here's your journal activity, here's your grammar activity, here's your language skill activity, go. And they'll just get started on it. Again, they've taken out their spiral notebooks. There's a student in charge of handing out the grammar worksheets. Sometimes they have the packet already. If you're using student consumables, they already have the consumable. Then the language skill, I have a writing notebook and I give them packets of worksheets, and the language skill might come from the worksheet, or I could have a student passing those out while the students get started on their journal. So let's take a closer look at each of those activities. Now, the journal, they always start with the grammar journals because we went over the extensions. Sometimes I'll just write extension, page 34, and that's all they need. We did page 34 yesterday. There's an extension at the bottom, and they just get started doing it. If it requires a little more explanation, I might get them started. Then they're often working. Those usually take about 10 minutes. Again, I put the topic the day before, so a quick explanation, and the extensions are usually pretty easy, so they get to work on that. Now, for the days that don't have an extension, I have a list of activities that really come from my other books, the Complete Writing Program and Writing Tricks Plus. And there's lots of journal activities in there to get the students in the habit of learning. Like Complete Writing Program has a chapter on writing tricks in it. So every writing trick, they're expected to use it in their writing. We may have done a writing trick 2 months ago, and our grammar journal time is a chance for them to practice and keep that trick fresh in their minds. Now, they should be using their writing tricks in their writing assignments anyway, but they're learning dozens of tricks. Some are going to be forgotten. So it's a way to keep the tricks fresh in their brain, because I've only got 10 months with these students, and the journal time is a way to cycle through all those mini lessons that I've done. And the Writing Tricks Plus and the Complete Writing Program have lots of ideas in there. Combined with the journal extension, there's always something powerful to be working on. Also, while they're doing this, I have a countdown clock, and I might set it, depending on the assignment, average might be 10 minutes. I'll set it for 10 minutes. Some assignments go more quickly, some take a little more. I could set it for 8 minutes, 12 minutes. But they'll have a countdown clock, so it kind of keeps them moving. And when the clock rings, then boom, they just know, okay, we just did our journal. Now it's time for grammar. I'll do the grammar lesson. You've seen in the examples of the worksheet, some lessons, they might take 20, 30 minutes, but that's usually the first lesson in a series of worksheets. The second, third, and fourth lessons usually go very quickly. So go up and do the quick mini lesson, and they get to work on the independent practice from the worksheets. Some days we're short on time. I might give them a little less and have them finish for homework. A lot of times they won't finish all the Smart Start activities, but they'll finish projects during the day. They might finish their science or social studies or health lessons early, and then they go back and finish their grammar journals or finish their Smart Start routines. And I do collect the journals about every 6 weeks. I'll collect them, and I give them points for every activity. So if they complete the activities, they get 3 points. If they finish most of it, they get 2. If they did some of it, they get 1. Then the students who have the most points clearly have been keeping up with the work. So they get an A, or we don't give grades, we give numbers, so they get a 4. Students who do average amount of work might get a 3 or a B. And again, this turns into a great way to tell the parents how engaged their students are. Because I'll have students who have almost nothing, and they just sit there, and I can show the parents, okay, they have 40 minutes to do a routine we do every day, and they do almost nothing. So when we meet with principals or the parents and find out why the child's not succeeding, sometimes it's a motivation problem. And, this is hard evidence that they are just not participating in the class. Finally, the last one, they'll do activities for language skills. This is where they work on vocabulary. They might do synonyms, antonyms, root words, prefixes, and suffixes. And there's all kinds of places to draw lessons for this. I know it's self-serving here, but I do have a book, Common Core-Based Language. It does say 6th grade edition, but it's really appropriate for grades 5 and up, because if you know how Common Core works, it all just builds. And so the 6th grade edition will have everything from grades 3 through 6. It may not have a few grade 7 and 8 ones, but it is very, very heavy on language skills. So if you're going to use Common Core-based language for the language part of your Smart Start, let me show you a few of the routines that you can use. These are routines that you only need to teach once, and the students will know what to do every time you use it. So in these routines, the students will typically spend a few minutes a day for 5 days and practice spelling, parts of speech, alphabetizing, how to read phonetic spelling that's found in dictionaries. They'll practice vocabulary and writing. For a 10-minute exercise, it's a very efficient use of time, and they're getting a lot of skills in a very short amount of time. And again, it frees you up to work with small groups on this skill or other skills you're working on in your classroom. It gives you time to take care of administrative issues in the classroom or other issues that pop up along the way. It just gives you some flexibility, some breathing room, and so many benefits of these routines. So the first language routine here is practicing context clues when reading. The worksheet's called Vocabulary from Literature. And the goal is to train the students, when they see a difficult vocabulary word, use the context clues around it to see if you can figure out the definition of the meaning yourself. You can see here in the directions, it says, find strong vocabulary words from your text. When they do see a strong vocabulary word, they'll have this worksheet out. So the students will typically have a few of these worksheets with them in their grammar journals. So when they do see a difficult vocabulary word, they have it there. It's ready to go. They'll write the vocabulary word on the line. And then the next step of the direction says, write the 4 words before the word, the vocabulary word itself, and the 4 words after the word. So you can see where it says sentence from the book, they're going to put the 4 words before the vocabulary word with the vocabulary word, and then the 4 words after. So they're just kind of writing down a part of the context that they've seen in the book. Then they'll examine it, not just those 9 words, but they'll examine the whole area. You've trained them to do it. And they'll come up with what they believe is the definition. And they'll write what they think is the definition here where it says definition in context. Then they'll check. How close did they come to getting the definition correct? So they'll look up the word in the dictionary. They'll write the dictionary definition there. The dictionary will usually have some synonyms. So put a synonym there that matches the context of what's happening. Then the students can decide how close did they get. And I let them give themselves a score. So they could put a 4 if they nailed it. They really got exactly what the word meant. They could put a 3 if they got pretty close, but it was pretty good. Then they could give themselves a 2 if they really weren't that close. And they could even give themselves a 1 if they were just purely guessing. That kind of helps them be mindful, and it gives them something to shoot for. They put a lot more effort into trying to guess the definition of the word when you encourage them to do that. So this is a very simple activity. It helps them develop some excellent habits, not only in reading, but acquiring vocabulary. And that'll obviously help them in their speaking and their writing. Also, it's a skill I regularly point out while we're reading in all subject areas. We'll stop and do this very quickly when we see a difficult word, whether it's in history or science or any other difficult text. So next, moving on to the next routine, what I'll do is I might spend a week or two on one routine. To mix it up, I'll go to another routine. I'll do that for a couple weeks, move on to a third routine, and I'll cycle a bunch of these routines in throughout the year, because once the students have learned it, they really don't have to teach it again. You just review it and off they go. So this next routine I'm going to show you is one of my favorites. It's called Shades of Meaning. The kids love it and it's highly effective. You can see here up at the top of the worksheet, they're given 5 words that basically mean run. But if you look at the nuance between the words, they're actually quite different. You can see run, dart, race, sprint, and whisk. Obviously, there are times where one word is far more appropriate than the other. So the students may recognize the words. They probably won't recognize all of them. But at the very least, they're going to really examine the nuance between the different words. Now, what they're going to have to do is they're going to have to rank them or put them in order from the least extreme version of the word to the most extreme version of the word. And these extreme versions of the word are kind of reflected there in that color chart. If you go get a paint sample, you get shades of the same color, where the least extreme version of the colors on the left and the most extreme version of the colors on the right, they're going to do the same thing with these 5 synonyms. So they might say, well, maybe whisk might be the least extreme version of that word, then maybe dart, then maybe sprint, then run. Or they may say race is the most extreme version of that word. And it's okay if they're not exactly right. The whole point is to look at the nuance. And the students can even get into groups and debate which words would go in which order. And that creates more discussion. They're internalizing the words and definitions even more. And that's just good teaching right there, when the students are debating what order to put these words in. So that's one way they'll do it. And then you can see at the bottom of the worksheet, instead of 5 synonyms, they're getting 3 synonyms for one word. And then there's an antonym, and they'll get 3 synonyms for that. And again, they'll have to put them in extremes from one word to its antonym, the other. In this case, it's cold and hot. So there's 3 words there that mean cold, 3 words that mean hot. They'll have to put the words in order from coldest to hottest. You can see there the 3 cold words are frosty, frigid, and brisk. And again, they may debate with each other or in their own minds. Well, frigid and frosty, which one is the most extreme cold? And whatever they decide is fine. They may say, okay, frigid. Okay, that's the coldest. Then they put frosty. Then probably brisk would be third. Then they look at the 3 words for hot. They may debate, well, sizzling, sweltering. Oh, I think sweltering might be the hottest. So they'd put sweltering last, and then sizzling, and then in the middle, humid is the least extreme version of hot. So when they look at it, they'll see something like frigid, frosty, brisk, humid, sizzling, and sweltering. And they can see one extreme to the other. It's an excellent activity. The kids really enjoy doing it, especially if you make it like a challenge out of it. See if you can put them in order that I put them in. Offer them raffle tickets and prizes for it, and they'll really get into it. Then you could have them put their answers on posters and have them pin their answers on the wall, have somebody in the group do a presentation. Well, we chose this because of this. Then challenge the crowd to challenge their answers and see if they could justify a different order, and all kinds of things you can do with this. And this is just one of the activities that they'll do. So in Common Core-based language, they go on to part 2 of this routine, because that was just day 1 and 2. So now they're moving on to day 3 and 4. And what they'll do here is they have these boxes in the workbook. They could do this in their grammar journal as well. And then they'll have it as a reference for a long time. So it says, for each set of words from part 1, make a picture that represents each word. Write each of the words at the top of the box and draw the picture below. So really what they're doing here is you're encouraging them to look at the nuance of the word and put the nuance in the picture. So how is frigid different than frosty? Can we see that in the pictures? And then have them explain their pictures to the group. And by the way, teach them that word nuanced. They'll get a big kick out of that, especially if you tell them, you'll be among the few 6th graders on the planet who know what the word nuanced means and are able to use it in a sentence correctly. So that'll motivate, especially your high-level students. They'll eat that up. So they'll make pictures, and by making these pictures and putting the nuance in the picture, it really starts locking these words in their brain. The side effect of this too is it gets them conscious of using the exact right words when they write. As you're writing with them in class and as they're writing, you could ask them, hey, stop, look at your writing, look at your words. Are there any words that you could say, well, maybe there's a better word for that? And get them in the habit of using the exact right vocabulary when they're writing. Finally, they'll move on to the rest of the activities, and this could take them up to 2 weeks to complete this activity. It says, write a short story for each set of words. Use each of the words in your story. You might just spend a week on one, like the hot and cold. Then the next week, they'll do short, tall. Then the next week, do walk, run. But what they'll do is they'll write a short story, and the whole point is to get them using these words in the context of writing, creating situations in their writing where these words would be appropriate. And finally, part 4, create your own shades of meaning. This could be a 2-week journal activity all by itself. So it says, use the set of words below to find 6 words that lead from one extreme to the other. So you can see here, rough and smooth, boring and exciting. So they'd find 3 synonyms for one, 3 synonyms for the other, put them in order, rank them from least extreme to most extreme. There they have their shades of meaning. Then have them go back and do parts 2 and 3 with the words that they created. This would make a great homework assignment. This could keep them busy for 45 minutes to an hour. Give the substitute something to do that they already know how to do. It'll make everybody's day easier, and they're getting really good practice while you're gone. So this shades of meaning is one of my favorite parts of the language part of our Smart Start routine. Common Core-based language has a few other routines that are excellent, more than you can possibly use an entire year, especially if you're making routines out of them. So I'd highly recommend the Common Core-based language, or you might have a bunch of resources already around to use for that part of your Smart Start. So that's the journal routine. And to bring the journal routine to a close, I basically shown you a 30 to 40 minute routine where the students are getting intense writing and grammar practice in a way that puts the dozens and dozens of writing skills together, and you're doing them all at the same time. This journal, grammar, and language skills routine, the Smart Start, is really a great holistic approach to writing. It's autopilot, and you really don't have to think about it once you have everything organized. And it really is a highly effective routine. So before I wrap up the tour of standards-based grammar here, I just want to go over real quick. There are student consumables, And it has all the worksheets that you need for the grade level in a book. It's got a very similar cover as the teacher edition. And it's really helpful when the students have their own copy. Reasons for getting consumables are, first, it's extremely affordable. If you've ever been involved in purchasing student consumables with districts, these are incredibly inexpensive. And my district won't purchase them because we have a state adopted program that we spend a fortune on. But I do have a letter that goes home at the beginning of the year letting them know that I do like to purchase consumables. If some super generous parent wants to purchase them for the class, I give them the price. And a lot of times I can't ask for money, but the head PTA parent can and might go around and collect money and purchase the consumables. That's kind of one way we get around that. Other advantages for getting consumables: imagine how much time it will take to run copies for these worksheets, especially if you're doing the entire program. And the wear and tear it saves on the machine. Some schools, they limit how many copies you could actually make. So this helps too. So getting consumables will definitely save you a lot of time and trouble. You'll see when you click on the individual grade level for each book, down next to the purchasing information, there's a section for purchase orders. You could actually click get a purchase order if the school wants to purchase them. Or you could click on for more information about consumables. You can click here and it'll ask you what grade level you want and you can order from there. Thanks for watching this tour of standards-based grammar, and go create better writers.
CreateBetterWriters.com